Great. Before we begin, I'd like to invite everyone to silence your devices. Even if you think they are silent, give them that extra shot of confidence that, no, really, they're silent. I appreciate it. One other quick announcement is that we request that while folks speaking at the microphone will be able to remove their masks if they're comfortable doing so, we ask that you keep yours on. We're trying to keep the entire community safe, and it's much appreciated that you join us in that effort. So good morning. I'm Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich, and I proudly serve this congregation as the minister. It's my privilege to welcome you here this morning to this service in remembrance of Lois Smith. Whether you're joining us here in the sanctuary or via Zoom, thank you to each of you for your presence. We'll begin by lighting the chalice, a symbol of hope that unites Unitarian Universalists across space and time. And Lois's stepson, Ben Seaman, will light the chalice for us. We gather this morning as one community bound together by loss and united by gratitude to be among those whose lives Lois touched. At every memorial service, I make a practice of sharing some important things about grief. First, and most importantly, there's no single way to grieve. It may show up as sadness, anger, regret, or many things all at once. It doesn't follow a tidy pattern. We may get overtaken by tears or shut down by numbness. We may find ourselves turning to share a story and then suddenly remembering that our loved one is gone. Grief ebbs and flows, and each of us must find our own way through. The task of grief is paradoxical: to hold the legacy that has been gifted to us, and at the same time to honor the full depth of what we lost. The hand that cups gently is the same as the hand that releases. We also need to know that when we lose someone we love, it brings back every other loss we've suffered, like the wires in a piano vibrating in response to a bass drum. Though each of us needs time to grieve alone, we also need to return to communities of friends and family. However beautiful a single voice may be, it's the harmonies we make together that swell the heart. Today we gather our voices to strengthen each other in our grief, to hold this family in the midst of their loss, and to be reminded that life is indeed a fragile gift. I invite you into a moment of prayer, contemplation of ultimate things. Spirit of love and compassion, come. Be with us as we celebrate the life of Lois Smith. Hold in your tender embrace those who have gathered today, physically or virtually, as well as those who could not be present. Offer them comfort and protect the spark of hope that it's in its own time will once again burn brightly. Blessed be. I invite you now to join me in a responsive reading, which is number 720 in the gray hymnals that you can find in the back of the seats in front of you. So number 720. I'll read the plain text, and you can respond with the words in italics. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. Of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. Blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Now, we'll have some remembrances, and I invite each person to come up when it is their turn. We begin with Carolyn.
Good morning. I want to thank you all for coming. I knew my mom was special, but this reinforces it for me. I thought there might be a handful of people here. We all had a special name for our mother. Mine was Mumsy. Mumsy was always there when I needed her, and even sometimes when I thought I didn't need her. It didn't matter if we discussed the weather or a personal issue. After our conversation, she would send me newspaper clippings, magazine articles, pamphlets, books, or a subscription to a new health newsletter. I've had several neurosurgeries in my lifetime, and she's always been there for me. On one occasion, after my first hip surgery, she slept in the hospital bed next to me. I'm not sure how much she slept, but I know I was able to sleep knowing my Mumsy was right there if I needed her. As it turned out, this was one of those times that I needed her more than I knew. That morning, the chief of the surgical ward stopped by with several young doctors to review my case. Mumsy expressed her concern that my blood pressure was not being monitored, and I had a history of low blood pressure. When the doctor tried to cover up this oversight, I couldn't resist adding, well, she would know this because not only is she a nurse, but she's worked for the Joint Commission for Accreditation of Hospitals for years. Needless to say, I received much more attention after that, and more importantly, much better care. My mother has overcome many obstacles in her life. When she graduated with honors from college, she was 7 months pregnant with me. She was told she couldn't participate in the graduation ceremony because she obviously wasn't serious about her career. This story reminded me of that ad slogan, "We've come a long way, baby." She taught her children valuable lessons through both her words and her actions. I remember a girl at college that stated she was only there to find a husband. This was in the 80s. I couldn't help but wonder how many other women thought that way too. In addition to being an advocate for women, she volunteered her time and energy to help those in need. She didn't just talk about how things could be better, she rolled up her sleeves and dived right in. One of my first memories was when I was 16, and she picketed to stop the nuclear arms race every weekend with a group at the town center. At the time, I thought she was a little eccentric, but today I realize how important that issue was then and still is now. Mumsy was an awesome cook. Depending on who's coming for dinner, she would make something special, most of the time healthy dishes. On Thanksgiving Day, there was always a morning hike in the morning before chowing down later that day. When I was young, I didn't understand when we went hiking or camping why we picked up trash that wasn't ours. Her motto, to always leave a place better than when you got there, applied to every aspect of her life and now her death. She has left this world a better place for so many. Thank you.
That's whatever you're comfortable with.
I'll go first. You're much funnier.
We brought a team.
This is the A-team behind me. Tim Withers, I don't want to fail to mention, longtime friend of my brother's from college who agreed to come up here in case we couldn't get through this. So, thank you. Thank you all for coming. It does mean a lot to see a lot of people here. I'm Julie, the youngest of Lois's 4 children, and pardon me, it's tough to get through this, but do our best. So I wanted to share with you some of the wonderful gifts my mom shared with me. When I was 1, and my parents had just separated, my mom would keep me in her bed at night rather than placing me in my crib. She told me it gave her comfort to have me, her tiny baby, snuggled up next to her during what were the first nights and weeks and months she spent alone, really for the first time in her adult life, without my dad, the man she thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. I understand from what she shared with me that my tiny presence comforted her. And that's a memory of my mom's that she shared with me that I'll hold dear forever. It gives me great comfort now to know that even as tiny as I was, and that in one of the incredibly rare moments in her life that she was vulnerable and alone and sad, I gave her some measure, unwittingly, of comfort. Growing up, my mom insisted on family dinner at 6 p.m. every night, and I hated leaving the neighborhood games to come inside. I remember my older siblings' petulant protests as my mom took the phone off the hook and placed it on the counter. You know, in those days, there was only one phone in the house, our lifeline to all of our friends. But she didn't want us disturbed by anything. She required we sit and eat together. And I remember how busy those meals were. And we may have been reluctant at first to sit together as a family to share a meal, but it was rare that I wanted to leave the table as we got into the mix of a family dinner. This was as much a testament to my idolization of my older siblings as it was a tribute to my mom's good cooking and the sense of togetherness that she created and fostered with those meals. I've attempted to replicate that with my own children. Meal times remain sacred, and my kids have come to enjoy that time, even in their busy teenage years. And we all have my mom to thank for that. Thanksgiving, as my older sister mentioned, was kind of legendary in our home. Family and friends came from far and wide to celebrate and commune with us. My mom was a tremendous cook, not only because she was creative, thoughtful in her preparation, and had a keen sense of what we'd all love to eat, but also because she had an uncanny ability to time each dish to come out at the same time. It was a veritable orchestration of tremendously tasty dishes that always came together seamlessly. That was true every Thanksgiving. A very, very challenging meal to orchestrate for anyone that's tried. But getting an enormous Thanksgiving feast on the table seamlessly wasn't enough for our mom. She added what we later dubbed the march to the itinerary. She would wake early, get everything in motion for the feast, set the table, everything ready for us when we'd come back, and then march us all out the door, whether you like to or not. There are a lot of excuses over the years on why we were late, had to go back and get the Indian pudding, couldn't make the march, but if you were there, you were out the door. And she and Greg would have already scoped out the trail for that day because they both prepared, over-prepared maybe, but we were grateful. They knew exactly where we were going most of the time. And we got back on schedule, and nothing burned, nothing was overcooked, nothing was even tepid. It was perfect. Perfect. It was a quintessential Lois day. As you may know, our mom died on Thanksgiving Day. She has forever claimed that day. As well she should, and it will be hereafter for all of us, her family, Thank Lois Day. Our mom was, as busy as she was, made her house welcoming to all visitors. It was a small home, a 1,200 square foot classic Cape Cod. Early in my childhood, she had the wall taken down between the kitchen and dining room. In place of our kitchen table, she installed a fold-out couch. Yes, we had a fold-out couch in our kitchen. The kitchen was not a place necessarily just to eat. It was a place to snack, to cook, to talk on the phone, again, the only phone in the house, not a lot of privacy there, to hang out, and even to sleep. It may have been a tiny home. There was always room for another friend or family member to visit. She taught us to treasure family and friends, and there really is no greater gift. And all of you being here is a real testament to that. Our mom, who was organized, tidy, and responsible, with capital letter R, was incredibly tolerant of our natural childhood desire to have pets. We had a veritable menagerie growing up: birds and hamsters, guinea pigs, snakes, cats, and a wonderful dog who adopted us, Charlie. 4 kids and all those pets. It's surprising to me now, as a mother of 2, that my mom was willing to open up our home to all those pets and the challenges, mishaps, and even the costs they brought. She taught us that you had to temper the urge to be organized and tidy, and having a home that was sometimes messy, and in part because of our fur babies, loving and welcoming. We camped nearly every summer of our youth at Ferry Beach in Maine, sometimes just a couple weeks, sometimes a month. We could only afford to stay longer if my mom got the camp nurse position. It was a working vacation for her. And if you've been there, some of this will be a little nostalgic, I hope. We made tie-dyed shirts and pottery in Greer House. We participated in talent shows and plays in Rowland Hall. We rang the bell on Quillen Porch to announce the arrival or departure of dear or new soon-to-be dear friends. We lined up in our wet bathing suits on that back porch of the Quillen, parsing out our pennies, dimes, and nickels to buy chocolate ice cream cones, and it began dripping even before we could get our clammy little hands around them. And we camped in the Grove, site number 1, every year, dubbed Skunk Hollow. We ran around on our own all day long, though Mom knew where we were based on the tie-dye schedule, sightings at the tetherball court, and the canoe trip itineraries. I won't go into detail on those, Carolyn. Our mom, with 4 kids' help, would put up our big tent, our cots, set up our sleeping bags, coolers full of weeks' worth of food, our cook stove, our meal tent. That's 1 adult and 4 little kids. Weeks to a month worth of clothing, supplies, and food. That sounds terrifying to me. But she really did make it look easy. At sunset, we'd protest mildly when Mom wrangled us to join the friendship circle on the beach. But we felt fellowship for the first time as we held hands with family and friends in a circle that felt warm and safe. We listened to grown-up words of gratitude and thankfulness. It seemed special even to 5-year-old me as I settled into that circle of trust. What a gift my mom gave us, learning of friendship and trust in such a wonderful environment. I can still smell Ferry Beach, the old wooden porch, the warm sand, the sea salt spray of the ocean, the fragrant pine grove, the campfires, the kerosene smell of our cook stove, the dampness of our seaside bathing suits or our rain-soaked sleeping bags, and the skunks of Skunk Hollow. I love all those smells still. And I can still see my mom. She relaxed there, maybe for the first and last time each year. And I can still feel my hand in hers, a friendship circle. She had soft, feminine, delicate hands, despite all her hard work. I've got a childhood chock full of wonderful memories. I've got lessons of love, friendship, hard work, integrity, and what sheer willpower and determination can accomplish. It's my mom's life story. And now it's a part of mine. I think it's natural for humans to want more of their closest relationships. You never hear people say, I got my full. I got all I needed. I'm sated, I'm satisfied. For years, I wanted more of my mom. I wanted more of her time, her attention, her focus. taken her death for me to realize she gave me all she had. She gave me so much more than she had growing up. She gave me all I needed. She gave us, all of us, everything she had. Thanks, Mom. Love you.
We're a bunch of criers. This probably won't go any better. Big babies, right? Good morning, and thank you all for coming. I am Lois' son, Tom. I assume that most, if not all of you, knew my mom. But the Lois I would like to speak of today is one many of you did not know. The year is 1968. My mom is a single mother of 4 children under 8. She is a full-time nurse. She is 29. Surely this was not what she had planned on, but nonetheless, it was by choice. She has been described by someone who respected and cared for her as uncompromising. I don't believe she had any illusions of how difficult it would be to raise 4 children by herself. She did what she felt was right for her and her children, her birdies, as she would call us. The level of sacrifice that it would entail was never a consideration. This is one of the hallmarks of my mother's remarkable life. Doing the right thing did not come with caveats. Years later, after she had dismissed another eager suitor, and there was no lack of eager suitors, I asked her why none of them ever seemed good enough for her. She seemed surprised. Oh, some of them were good enough for me. None of them have been good enough for you. And she meant the 4 of us. She instilled in her children a sense of obligation. Consideration of others' needs come before your own. Over the next decade, my sisters and I did everything in our power to ease the burden of single motherhood. We were model children. We treated each and every one of our babysitters with dignity and respect. Dozens of them, in fact. We were model students, constantly competing with each other to get the best grades or achieve the highest awards. I can still remember how excited my mom was to come home after the end of a long day of work and receive another sealed envelope from one of our teachers, requesting an in-person meeting because that was the only way to truly express the wonder of our academic achievement. My mom was so proud of us that she kept all of our report cards, which she gave to me, actually. Here's an excerpt from one of them dated January 1971. Tom completely ignores the rules of punctuation. Even though he can recite them, he seldom uses them. Or this glowing report from 3rd grade. Tom seems satisfied with doing the minimum amount of work, and he mumbles when he speaks. It's still true today, unfortunately. My mom worked full-time, and her children learned early on to be self-sufficient. When I started playing hockey and needed shooting practice, I dressed Amy up in goalie outfits and shot pucks at her in the driveway. I actually made her wear a dress, so it was harder to get the shot through. At any rate. In the winter, we would play 2-on-2 floor hockey in the dining room. We would beat the hell out of each other. Mom would come home, check for serious injury, and make dinner. The rule was no punching in the face or knives. These rules were not strictly adhered to. Make no mistake, my mom was one of the brightest people I have ever met. Had high expectations for us. Rarely met, but never lowered. We were expected to try everything, do the best we could, and excel at what we put our efforts towards. There were no acceptable excuses for failure to do our best. She did not hover over us or monitor everything we did. She did not check our homework or pack our sports equipment bags. We were expected to do well out of self-respect. to achieve because we are capable of it, be on time, be prepared, contribute. She did not intercede on our behalf. We were responsible for our behavior and our success. That does not mean she was not paying attention. You always knew she had your back. I clearly recall one memorable example from first grade when I had received an F on a particularly complex assignment. I had flunked cat coloring. The next morning, I got a rare ride to school and an escort to class. I was terrified, and not for me. The younger Lois stood a bit shy of an athletic 6 feet in height. She was intimidating even when she wasn't angry. She politely showed the failing cat paper to my teacher and asked what the issue was. The teacher replied, "Cats aren't green." My mom explained that cats were in fact any damn color I cared to draw them because I was 7. The teacher enthusiastically agreed. I'm sure being a single mom, working full-time, running a household, and making ends meet could not have been easy, yet I don't ever remember a time when I felt insecure. If there were concerns about finances or employment or running a house of 5 by herself, they were never expressed out loud. Only in hindsight as an adult and father of 2 could I truly appreciate the level of fearlessness and determination this took. In much the same way excuses were not tolerated, she made none for herself. I distinctly remember in 2007 being at my daughter's soccer game, and my mom, who came to many games, asked me how everything was going. I told her the housing market had crashed, our construction company had very little work, we had 2 kids in school, mortgages to pay, and we were feeling a bit stressed, but there was no point in complaining. She responded with this: "We don't, do we?" That was it. She didn't even glance at me. After a few minutes of silence, I asked, "We don't what, Mom?" "Complain," she responded. Then she gave me a juice box and a Fig Newton. She literally brought those to the games for me. To some, this might sound unsympathetic. She could have told me how sorry she was to hear that, or offered some pointless platitudes about how everything would turn out all right. But she didn't. She knew things don't always turn out all right. She knew I'd have to figure it out. I was raised by Lois Funnell Smith, so I did. When faced with adversity, all our children do. Throughout this decade, my mom didn't simply survive. Driving our kids to hockey practice at 4:30 in the morning, well, actually me. Attending Julie's and Amy's volleyball games after school, trying to figure out where Carolyn was. No, she thrived. She became a major in the United States Army, a director of nursing at Connecticut Valley Hospital. She biked to work in the morning. She learned to play the recorder really badly. She fought for peace. She marched on Washington. She wrote her children poems. She took us camping and hiking and swimming in Stony Creek. She was an intellectual and physical whirlwind. She was one of the most determined people I have ever met. Her children grew and left home, start successful careers and families of their own. Regardless of where they went, they took with them the lessons my mom modeled. Take care of others, be determined, always get back up, fight for each other. She lived a remarkable life in the service of her children and others. I will miss her. People ask me how my mother died. The easy answer is that she died of cancer. It would also be untrue. She told us she was done, and then she simply left. That is the honest answer. That is how my mother would do it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Amy Saunders. I'm Lois's daughter, number 3 in line, and this is my daughter, Katie. Your mother is always with you. She's the whisper of the leaves as you walk down the street. She's the smell of certain foods you remember, flowers you pick, the fragrance of life itself. She's the cool hand on your brow when you're not feeling well. She's your breath in the air on a cold winter's day. She is the sound of the rain that lulls you to sleep, the colors of a rainbow. She is Christmas morning. Your mother lives inside your laughter. She's the place you came from, your first home, and she's the map you follow with every step you take. She's your first love, your first friend, even your first enemy. But nothing on earth can separate you. Not time, not space, not even death.
I'm Katie. I'm Lois's granddaughter. This is a poem I wrote for her. Not every grandma will knit you a bright pink pussy hat and then take you on a bus ride to the Capitol, knees squeezed tight between torn bus seats and poster board, hours of driving to spend the rest of the day with you, marching the streets through January freezing temperatures, just trying to make a difference. Not every grandma makes a 10-page booklet on how to walk her dog and outlines the best routes for you to take, including side notes about the gardens you'll pass along the way, and always has a bag packed full of dog treats, ready to go, but she doesn't forget the separate pocket that she's also filled with hypoallergenic treats, especially set aside for the neighborhood dogs that you're going to walk by. Not every grandma has a house filled with frogs. Tree frogs scaling the walls, a pair of wooden-toed instruments on the kitchen countertop. Every grandchild knows the nightly symphony of croaks that echo into her guest bedroom of her old lake house. Not every grandma runs marathons in her 70s, gets arrested while protesting, plays the clarinet, makes nursing units cower, can expertly handle an M16, invites refugees over for Thanksgiving, goes with you to meditation class, teaches you to swim in a lake, meows in every voicemail, and can cook you a bowl of conchigli, no matter how last minute you ask to come over for dinner. Not every grandma can do these things because there was no one like my grandma. Thank you.
So I invite you all to join in singing together in the Teal Hymnal, number 1002, Comfort Me.
Comfort me, with me, oh my soul. Dance with me, dance with me, dance with me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul.
Thank you. You may be seated.
All right. I'm going to get this out of the way. First, I'm going to apologize to Lois for stealing that pie filling from my brother Tom's house this morning. And also to apologize for Lois because, you know, you heard from the good sheep. I was a little bit more the black sheep, stepson, so, you know, I didn't dress correctly. I'm not really prepared, but here are some thoughts that I have on Lois. You know, it's said that when someone passes, that a part of you passes, goes away. I'd like to suggest that the opposite is true here. Let's see if I can find a way to explain it. I also have to apologize to Lois and to all of you intelligent, smart, highly educated people for my imminent plagiarism of themes and ideas here. I told myself not to say So there's these two fish swimming along, and they're swimming along the water, and they swim by an older fish. Older fish says to them, "Hey, fish, how's the water?" "Oh, no, okay." Keep swimming along. A couple minutes pass, another fish says to the other little young fish, "What in dog's name is water?" Well, what does that mean? That's that sometimes the most obvious, simplest things in life are impossible to see. You don't see them, but they're right in front of you. You may live in them. You know, when I first met Lois, it was at what I believe me and my brother Ben here kind of affectionately called the House of Broken Families down there on State Street, which you may know as the Unitarian Universalist Society of New Haven, where our broken families came together and managed to get together in the way that you now know, 7 of us living in a 3/4 Cape on Arthur Road, North Brantford. As a test run, my father and Lois decided it would be good to take us up to Ferry Beach. You heard the story of how much fun it was up there, and see how well we all did as a family. And I hung out with Amy a bunch, Ben hung out with Julie a bunch. I managed to pick up a bottle of salad dressing with no cap on it at our first dinner outside, and I shook it like a madman, covering everyone at the table. And amazingly, I didn't get chided too badly for that one from Lois. But over time, I managed to find myself to be chided by Lois a lot. She would be able to hold a mirror up to you and show you your character. And if there was no character, she was going to make sure you got character. As an awkward teenager and the things, I was sort of like, everything will be just a little bit better if I put my boundaries over here, guys. But Lois wasn't going to have that. And a good example is a story that Tom related this morning about a bunch of kids coming to the door, and Lois has ice cream out for everybody. Hey, what do you want? 2 unpopular flavors. I think it was strawberry and something else that no one wanted. Everyone took ice cream except one kid who couldn't decide. I can't make up my mind. Lois says, well, then you don't get any. Walks back inside, and the kid surely never made that mistake ever again. Lois taught that kid how to have a boundary and how to understand their own self and how to stand up tall. And there's a lot of little lessons in that about rules and expectations and everything. As a rebellious teenager, I broke a lot of rules. I would get snapped back into position by Lois in one of 2 ways. Either I would get yelled at in the moment, and 5 minutes later she'd be the sweet, amazing super mom, perhaps the original Tiger Mom, that we all knew and fell in love with immediately when we met her at Ferry Beach. And she would do this other thing where she would write a letter and leave it for you. You would read it and you wouldn't be able to respond. It was very frustrating to not be able to talk back and just have to listen to her sensible, true, correct, absolutely spot-on words over and over. But little by little, that helped build the character, And sometimes I think her views were iconoclastic in how I would see it. I was a mopey teenager thinking, oh, wouldn't it be terrible if something happened to me? Wouldn't you be sad if something happened to me? No, she'd be angry at me, she said. And she'd be angry at me because you would have done that to your father. For Lois, every decision was your own decision. You made your own decisions. It wasn't random. It wasn't circumstance. If it happened to you, it was because you chose to put yourself in that position. So she did. We had this sort of tough time there at the house there on 40 Arthur Road. Can't fit too many people into a small place. And I left and I went and got an apartment in New Haven. And I didn't talk to my family for months. And I guess I saw how hard it is to support yourself, even just myself. I was just me. Never mind all the people she supported. And then I got one more letter. I got one more letter from Lois in about October. And it said, told me how I had gotten it so wrong yet again. And that maybe now I could see that all the things that they did for me, I had a problem with. I couldn't stay out late. I had my little petty complaints. But what she had done is raised me under a safe house, food on the table, lessons, good school, good family. Those are the things that matter. And that snapped me right back into, well, I don't know, Tom said on his Instagram post, she made a man out of me. And that's what she did in that moment, in that one letter. And I realized I can never turn my back on my family and my father. I have to be there for them. And so, in that moment, I think I learned, did anybody catch what I plagiarized before? I'll help you. Here's the rest of the plagiarism. Diderot had a robe that was tattered, and he decided to get a new robe. And then that robe became so nice that everything else he had was crap, right? Tawdry, terrible thing. So he had to upgrade everything else to keep up with that robe. Well, after a while, he sort of became a slave to that robe. And that's how it is in life. And the world will happily support our vices, our sense of self-entitlement, our greed, our desire, our things we want. If you worship money, you're always going to feel poor. If you worship beauty, you're always going to feel ugly. It's never going to be enough, right? Well, Lois had enough. She always had enough. And she went and got more, as Tom and, as everyone said, they'll do a better job of speaking to all those things. But the true freedom in life, I think, is these small things. The smaller things that have to do with your small sacrifices for other people. Remembering to put that juice box in Tom's thing. Remembering to do the small things for everybody who needs them, who are less fortunate than you. When Tom and I talked about that, he told me that story. We spent the last week with Lois, the vulnerable Lois that at least I had never known a vulnerable Lois. But we sat there and Tom told me that story, and then in that moment I realized, and this is the part where I'm trying to impress all you Yaleys, Lois is a stoic. She's calm. A storm raging around her. You would never know there's a storm. Her brother Bob would come visit us. It was the most magical time for me as a kid to hear the stories about the trains. But he was coming to Lois for help, for his own issues. But I never would have known. And like the Stoics also said that the shape of your cylinder, your character, is going to be how you roll down that hill. I know I'm doing a terrible job at explaining that concept. Determinism of your inward character, of how you have control over your virtues and your character, and that is how you will roll through life. I guess I have to try to close this up somehow. Well, right, I remember. So all these little things, there's things that are small that, Lois was a rule follower. She, believe it or not, Lois, you made me a rule follower, and enjoy the little things. And that's kind of what you do, I guess, in a sort of Stockholm Syndrome way when you live in what we affectionately call the Crucible, 40 Arthur Road, where we literally had a job board with point system for tasks. Cleaning up the dishes, cleaning up the living room was, I think, 1 point. Laundry was maybe 2 points, bringing the laundry. 3 points for the dishes, 5 points for the dishes, a couple points for walking the dog. It was a whole schedule, and it all evened out if you looked at it, everything. And so, that's how we weighted the chores and made it fair between everybody. So after a while, you're just going to start to learn to like your task. Otherwise, it's chipping away like, that Prometheus bird or whatever. So I'd like everyone to take a look at this Scotch Brite Dobie. Everyone know what this thing is? Does this thing scream Lois to you? Because I see Lois in this. No, I bought this. I'll give it to you. So, washing dishes every time for the past, I guess now 40 years, there's not a single time I can wash the dishes that I don't hear, "It has to be hot water, Ralph. It has to be hot water. And if it doesn't squeak, it's not clean." So, Lois never left. She's here. She's here. She's here. I'm keeping it. You can pry it out of my cold, dead hands. No, I'm kidding. I still want to put it on the table so you can all photograph it with her photos. It should be on that table. But she's here with us. You just have to look. She's just there. You see? Thanks. Thanks. I'm going to go cry now outside. Is that okay?
Thank you. I have to explain this hat. I had a cancerous tumor removed from my head about a month ago, and then some plastic surgery to patch the holes so the brains didn't leak out. I'm not sure when you can tell, but the hat probably prettier than the bandages, so I'll go with that. I wrote this out because I couldn't be sure what I could do. Grief is part of life, unfortunately. We lose parents, friends, spouses, children, and it is painful, but often too real. I've had a hard time with Lois's death. When you lose a spouse, you lose a partner, lover, and companion. Sometimes I cry all day, and sometimes I cannot do anything but sit. I'm fortunate to have a good therapist who says that grief is like a ball in a box. Every time you hit the wall, it hurts, but the box gradually gets bigger, and you hit the wall less often. But sometimes grief comes along and stabs you in the back. But you need to survive that and move on. Lois was a wonderful person, strong, capable, bright, and loving. I was fortunate to have been married to her for 41 years, half her life, and nearly half of mine. We met at the Unitarian Universalist Church on Whitney Avenue. It was originally a Universalist church that had been displaced by the Oak Street connector, but the Unitarians and Universalists joined together in '61. I had moved to Connecticut from Kansas in 1976 with my first wife and 3 sons, and we were heading toward divorce. I had left a tenured faculty position to take a job in a private company so that I could make more money and to bring my wife back to an area where it would be easier for her to get a job. As part of the process, I took my older 2 sons to the UU church so they would have some continuity during the divorce, and also for me. Then I met Lois on a church retreat and was really impressed. After I filed for divorce, I called her up and said the church had asked me to consider being on the board, and I knew that she had been board president at one time and could help me think about it. We met at the church, then went to dinner at the Budapest restaurant on Audubon Street on a cold, snowy night in February. There were no other people there, and they had a violinist to come and serenade the guests. Lois hated violins, and we got too much attention because there was no one else there. So, after some discussion of the church and the board activities, I said, I really could not serve on the board if she were on it. And she was startled, saying, well, she had worked in therapy and groups, and why would I have a problem with her? And I said, well, because I was very much in love with her. And she said, I don't think I heard you right. So I repeated myself. Then she said, well, she had someone living with her. So I replied, well, I'm talking about the future, not the past. She was clearly interested, and we headed to our separate homes. Her live-in was soon gone, and we started a romance, entirely in secret because the divorce took a long time to get finalized, and our older children knew each other. Lois taught Sunday school and had my 2 older sons and 2 of her daughters in the class, and my interest in Lois didn't have anything to do with the divorce. We used to meet briefly in secret in the basement of the church on Sunday morning when we would bring our newspapers to the recycling center. A good metaphor for our marriages. So, yeah, it's important not to lie to your children, but sometimes it's hard. Her son Tom said something that, I know you're interested in that new man at the church who has 2 sons. And she could probably say, no, because I have 3 sons. Tom had not seen the youngest. Yeah. But I don't know why it's not important to lie to your children. I mean, they certainly lie to their parents. I mean, where'd you go? Out. What did you do? Nothing. So then when I got an apartment in Wallingford, we would meet there. When she would go off to meet me, it was referred to in the Smith household as going off to Northford International Airport. Sometimes I would be at her house when the kids were out, but once I had to slip out the window when one of them came home early. Fortunately, it was a first-floor window. And once Tom came home early and found us in the living room, and Lois had to swear him to secrecy. During that first summer, as you've heard, we went to the Unitarian camp near Saco, Maine, and we camped in adjacent spots. And Lois had daughters, Amy and Julie, and I had Ben and Ralph. And this went really well, and we thought, this is going to really work, putting 2 families together. But living in a small house with 1 bathroom and dealing with school and sports, it's not quite the same as being in Maine for a week next to the beach. When my divorce was final, we announced to the church that we were going to marry and surprised everyone. And as has been said, a second marriage is a triumph of hope over experience. We did marry the next May, having the wedding at the Whitney Avenue Unitarian Church, and then the reception on the Liberty Bell in New Haven Harbor. Our wedding song was John Denver's Annie's Song, and I waltzed all over Lois's feet. You know the song. It goes, you fill up my senses like a night in the forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a walk in the rain, like a storm in the desert, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again. Lois certainly was that to me. Ben and I and Ralph moved into Lois's house in North Branford. Carolyn had already moved out, and Tom was about to go to college, so we would only have 4 teenagers at home. Ben moved back to his mother's apartment after 1 year, and then we continued as college-bound high school students gradually moved out. We had a year of no children at home, and I had a lot of trouble with that, but Lois had great relief. Then my son David came to live with us until he went to college. And Tom and Renee built us a lovely house on Clear Lake on property that an old friend, John Kordak, had, and sold it to us when he went off to a retirement home. We had 28 years there with many visits from friends and family. We loved being able to look at the lake every day for migrating ducks, local birds, and occasionally otters. Lois had graduated from the University of Connecticut with a degree in nursing and also a degree in English. She was married and pregnant when she graduated, and the school, as you've heard, in its ultimate stupidity, said she was not serious about her job and did not give her the prize she had earned as an excellent student. And then they have the gall to ask her as an alumna to donate to the university. So yes, misogyny is alive and well, and we must continue to fight that. She and Brian Smith married when she was in college, and they had 4 children. As she said, it was important to have more than 1 child so that you know it's not your fault. So she was most proud of her 4 children, who grew up to be fine, capable, and successful people. Lois and Brian divorced after 11 years of marriage. And then 11 years later, Lois and I married. And then when we'd been married 11 years, I got a little nervous, but she kept me. Another aspect of being married was that we no longer fit in the Whitney Avenue Church, which was mostly a singles group, and there really was no RE program. So we moved to the Hamden Church, arriving just as Wayne Chattee, who had been minister for maybe 30 years, was giving his last sermons. Lois had worked at the Connecticut Mental Health Center as a state employee, starting out in the crisis unit. As the person who hired her said, anyone who has raised 4 kids knows how to deal with crises. So she worked her way up to associate director of nursing, and before we met, had joined the Army Reserve to make extra money. She had regular duties and got an assignment to fulfill her obligations by working at the Fairhaven Clinic. She had annual medical training and regular physical training and on the firing range. And as has been said, she had an expert badge with an M16. This certainly gave her credibility when in anti-gun and anti-war settings. She was terrible with the .45, though, she said. But she resigned from the military a couple of years after we married, since family dynamics were pretty demanding. And this also kept her from being sent to Afghanistan. In 1980, shortly after we married, she went to Connecticut Valley Hospital to be director of nursing and to help prepare the hospital for Joint Commission accreditation. The hospital had been in bad shape for a while, and the state of Connecticut brought people there from the Connecticut Mental Health Center, which had Yale and state employees, and they were sent there to fix the place. She knew she had to change the culture. One of her sayings was, "Do not confuse gentleness with weakness." Early upon arriving there, one of the staff members shoved a patient into the wall. She then, the next day, brought in police and had him arrested for abusing a patient. And of course, this got around quickly and the workplace tenor changed. After several years of cleaning up things, including dealing with a resentful, suspicious boss who even tapped her phone, and moving hundreds of patients among several buildings to get a better organization, she did get the hospital accredited. And then soon after, she left to become a Joint Commission surveyor herself. She did teaching at conferences, and occasionally she did consulting to hospitals who wanted assistance in preparing for surveys. We had many years of traveling. We went on hiking trips with the Appalachian Mountain Club and overseas adventure travel to New Zealand, Australia, Chile, Spain, and with couples from this church to Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and Spain. And once we hiked the knife edge on Mount Katahdin with Elder Hostel. The people who advised the Elder Hostel leader said, "You're crazy taking old people over that knife edge." But we survived it. Lois was also involved in many social activities. She went on 3 different marches in Washington, D.C., once with 2 of her daughters, once with a granddaughter in the Women's March, as you've heard, and then once with me on the Science March. That was back in 2017. And once she was arrested with a group of people from this church at a protest at the headquarters for United Technologies in Hartford. Her last 2 years of life were difficult. She needed back surgery for stenosis and scoliosis, but surgery was delayed because of COVID. Then, when recuperating, fell and had a serious concussion and some broken bones, and then a long recovery period with lots of pain pills. Unfortunately, the scoliosis caused her ribs to move toward her pelvis and caused some pain, also in the location where she had had pleurisy many years before. And it masked a tumor that was growing in her abdominal wall. When it was finally discovered in a CAT scan, it was inoperable, and she chose to use home hospice care. All of her children and stepchildren and many friends were able to visit before the end. On her last day, I sang 3 Gershwin love songs to her, and she died shortly after. She had been unconscious for several days, but I like to believe that she heard me and felt that it was okay to go. She was a wonderful person, strong, capable, and loving, and I miss her greatly. She is not immortal, although I would like to believe that, but she can live on in our memories. Please remember her for the strong, capable woman she was. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for your remembrances. This is a time when we'd like to invite other folks to share their remembrances as well. And I'd like to start with Amar Al-Haidar, who is a family friend. Where are you? There you are.
Thank you all for coming today, and the first part will be in Arabic because Lois wants me to say it in Arabic, and I'll read it in English afterwards. الاحتفال بحياة لويس سميث. لويس كانت وما تزال إلهاما لي وذات تأثير شديد في حياتي وحياة من حولها. أنا أعلم أنها كانت تعني الكثير للعاديين هنا، ولكن أنا أشعر أنني الخاسر الأكبر لأن الحياة لم تضعني في طريقها مبكرا. تعرفت على لويس حينما قدمت لهذا البلد في عام 2008، حينما رأيته لأول مرة في عصر يوم خريفي ذا ريح قارصة. أنا سألت نفسي: لما تتجسم تلك المرأة الطويلة النحيلة فضية الشعر دافئة الابتسامة ذات الكنز الصوفية الرمادية اللون؟ لما تتجسم عناء التعب هي وزوجها من أجل ناس أغراب لا يعرفونهم؟ لم أكن أدرك ذلك اليوم كم سيعنون لي هذان الزوجان، وكم سيكون تأثيرهم الرائع علي وعلى من حولي عميقا وإيجابيا. هذا التأثير الذي سيبقى لدي ما دمت على هذه الأرض. كانت لويس لي أما ثانية، صديقة، وإنسانا مثاليا قلما يصادفك الحظ وتلتقي مثله طوال حياتك. كانت ترى الجانب الجيد في أسوأ الظروف وفي أحلك الفترات. كانت تعرف متى تنصح ومتى تلطف الجو بنكتة خفيفة، ومتى تتعاطف معك، ومتى تبكي إلى جانبك أو تسمح لك بالبكاء على كتفها. فلترقد روحك بسلام يا عزيزتي، وتأكدي أن لمساتك الدافئة وإرثك الرائع سوف يدوم على هذه الأرض لأجيال. قال النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم: إذا مات ابن آدم انقطع عمله إلا من ثلاث: صدقة جارية، أو علم ينتفع به، أو ولد صالح يدعو له. Celebrating Lois Smith's life. Lois was and still is an inspiration for me, and her influence on my life and the life of people around me is huge. I know she means a lot to many of us in this room, but I feel that I am the biggest loser here because life didn't cross our paths earlier. I knew Lois when I came to this country back in 2008. When I saw her for the first time on a cold, windy fall afternoon, I asked myself, why would this tall, slender, silver-haired, warm-smiled lady with a gray light jacket, why would she put all that effort with her husband for foreign people she doesn't even know? I didn't realize that day how much those couple will mean to me, and how their wonderful effect will touch me and influence me as long as I lived on this earth. Lois was a second mom, a friend, and a perfect human rarely encountered in any person's life. She saw the best side in the worst scenarios, and during the darkest hours. She knew when to give advice, she knew when to tell a joke, when to sympathize, and when to cry next to you or let you cry on her shoulder. May your soul rest in peace. I assure you that your warm touch and your wonderful legacy will last on this earth for generations. Prophet Muhammad once said, when a human dies, all their work will end except three: an ongoing gift to people in need, a useful knowledge, or a child pray for them. The beauty here that Lois left all these three in me. Thank you.
If anyone would like to share, just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone around.
I stand up. There's no dancing. I'm Tom's friend. I'm a friend of the family. I hang out with them and annoy them for the most part. But I owe Lois at the very least, a goodbye, because she took good care of me when Tommy and I were going through our exploratory stages in college. But she was always kind to me. She was always warm. I went on a ton of Thanksgiving dinners and hikes. And usually I was with them at Thanksgiving because my mom was working as a nurse, so we put off our Thanksgiving till later in the weekend. I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I think my impression of Lois is that she was always strong in her beliefs and she was always strong in her opinions, but the thing that always struck me is her absolute ferocity and the love for her family. And when I mean fierce, I mean a lot of times I think as we go through life, things ebb and flow. We're not sure how we feel about the people around us. Never felt that from Lois. She would be warm, she would be soft, but you felt the intensity in her caring and the intensity for wanting her family to do well and to be loved, and to not just build that love between her and them, but to watch them build that love generationally to their kids, to her kids, to her grandkids. And I appreciated that because I can see it here in the way they speak about her. And I think that if there was any way to make Lois proud, it was this type of display that everybody was able to provide to her. So, I think that she was a special person, and as Ralph said, she lives on in all of you. So.
My wife, Jean, first started coming to USNH about 20 years ago. She was welcomed warmly by Lois, and they became fast friends. It wasn't long before we became friends as couples. I remember numerous times when we would get together to coach the Yukon women's basketball team to several national championships. When I think of Lois, I think of someone who was just a wonderful, warm, loving, giving person. She was one of the people that truly made the world a better place. She will be sorely missed. Lois, we will always love you, and you will always live in our hearts.
I came to USNH about 11 or 12 years ago, and I joined small group ministry. And for many years, I was an avid participant of the small group ministry at Greg and Lois's home, and I loved being there. And she was always very kind and very giving and very supportive. And I remember one of the last times we met, we had a wonderful dinner at her home that she gave, and this wonderful soup she prepared and the homemade breads. So she had so much heart and so much caring, and she took a real special interest in me because my son struggled a lot with mental health issues, and she was always there to support me through that as well. So Lois will always live on in my heart, and I had a lot of support, a lot of respect for her as a person. Thank you.
My membership is across the yard at Congregation Michigan Israel. But on the day of my husband's funeral, we were in the middle of COVID, just about a year ago, March, it was in March. And after the service at the cemetery, we came back to the house, at the apartment at Whitney Center. And we really didn't have enough people for the minyan, which is what the service is. I'm sure many of you have heard of that after the funeral. And I called both Rabbi Immerman from next door and Emeritus, Rabbi Brockman, who conducted the service, and I said, what'll I do? I said, I don't think I have enough people, and some of my children even had to go home because of their expectancy of another baby, and it was a whole thing, and I said, does it matter what hour? He said, you have it whenever you want. I said, well, what about the people that are attending and conducting? I said, one of my friends here can conduct the service. He said, Carol, relax. You do what you can do. Anytime you can do it, don't worry. Fast forward, we go around, another friend went around to the doors and asked, and Greg and Lois came. They didn't know us. We met one another in the hall, hung a few pictures together, things like that, but they didn't really know us. I mean, and they were there right on the spot. They were just there for us, and they were there for us for many, many times. We had dinner at their home. They would come, and we would share pizza and ours. And I mean, these were all times where we were together, but COVID certainly was doing its job. And I really think of the times that I don't know if I could have gotten through without their kindness, their love, and their understanding, both as individuals and as a couple. And I think it is one of the most joyous and enriching relationships I felt as an, quote, older person. You know, when you move in someplace you don't know, are you really going to meet people and make new friends? And we did. I am so ever and will be so ever grateful for their kindness and support. That's who they are.
I'll come where I can see you. I'm Bob Congdon. I've been a member here for about 40 years, maybe longer. A few quick memories of Lois. First of all, just seeing her walking the dog, having her dog with her, was one way that she showed her caring. I remember once visiting the lake house, and I think Julie was there with her two young sons. They were a bundle of energy in constant motion, bouncing off the furniture like pinballs. Lois had it. No issue. She was just very calm about it. And now I know why, because of all of you that she helped raise. My work with her here was around policy governance, which was a way that we operate now as a congregation. But she brought the breadth of her experience with the Joint Commission and did exhaustive research on that approach to changing the way that we operated. I really respected the way that she took risks for the things she believed in, first and foremost her family, but also for justice, fairness, and peace. And to the extent that she wanted her family to do well, that carried to many people in this room who are part of the extended USNH family. So Ralph, when you said she was up there, she's right here. She's right in this room with so many of us, and we're very grateful to have known her, had her in our lives.
Hi, I'm Renee Smith. I'm her daughter-in-law, and I feel like I won the mother-in-law lottery when I married Tom, because she was the best mother-in-law I could ever have dreamed of having. She was welcoming, she was non-judgmental, and most importantly, she knew what to do with little babies. And I had no idea what to do with little babies. And she was just a warm, loving, wonderful person, and I miss her terribly.
So somewhere around 1990, 1991, I was sleeping over at Lois and Greg's house, and I was good friends with David growing up. And we were upstairs, and he had just gotten a vinyl copy of Frank Zappa's Joe's Garage, and he was playing this, for me, and I was hearing it for the first time. And somewhere right around halfway through the first disc of it, it was one of the particularly raunchy songs. We took a quick break and we went downstairs, and Lois was in the kitchen, and she said, "I think this is a great time for you two to take the canoe out on the lake." And so we went outside and we got into the canoe, and we were about halfway around the clear lake there, and he goes, "That was Lois for Turn That Crap Off." And I said, I think I got that message as well, but so we listened at a little bit of a lower volume later when we got back in, but very many pleasant memories of canoeing around that lake and of spending time at that house, getting to know Lois. And then years later, when I started organizing small group ministries here, I had a very similar experience when, things were, there was a time when there was a lot of kind of questions about how small group ministries should be run. And I had a meeting with Lois, and she sort of did the same thing. It was like the equivalent of maybe it's time to take the canoe out, because she said, maybe it's time to consider a different model for this. And you know what, I think she was right. And we've taken so much of her wisdom, and she had just a beautiful way of imparting that wisdom on people around her, and I'll always hold that.
Hi, I'm Helen Von Allman Fanning. I'm Lois's niece, and I certainly am not prepared to say anything, but I don't want to go away and think I should have said something. I'm here with my husband today, and we're honoring this woman who we both feel was one of the brightest and classiest ladies we have ever known. And we miss knowing her. we were lucky enough to have seen her a couple of weeks before she died, and she was Lois. She was soft-spoken, but she had brilliant words to say and family history to share, and it was so fortunate that we were able to spend that time with her. So, thank you.
I want to share a quick memory too. After Lois had gotten her diagnosis, she and Greg invited me over for conversation, which is one of the privileges of being a minister, is walking with people during times of major life transitions. And we had our visit, and it was lovely, and she was very at peace with her decision to be on hospice. But what really struck me was that afterwards, as before I was heading to the elevators, she wanted to be sure to talk to me about someone who also lived at Whitney Center, who was having a bit of a rough time, and maybe, I could, make sure to give that person a call because, the person was struggling, and she was worried about the person, and so on. And I was so moved that here was this person facing her mortality, like head on, and was still caring for others while she was doing so. It was very powerful, and that will stay with me for a long time.
Hi, I'm John Watson. Many of you know me. Greg and Lois have been our best friends for many years now. We got most acquainted on a trip to France in about 2004 when we got, by accident, wound up sharing a rental car. And since then we've been on many trips and in each other's homes. Hardly a week has gone by. And as I've listened to this, I've thought there are two words that I want to share and emphasize about Lois. The first is soup. It has been hinted at here, but Lois made the best and the most soup of any human being I have ever heard of. If everyone in this room has had a couple bowls of soup for every 20 that I have had, we represent oceans of soup, which Lois made. The other word that I wanted to share and emphasize about Lois is grace. She was fallible, I assume, but I never saw it. She was as generous and as warm and as reliable as I have ever known a human being to be. And at the end of her life, by the way, I resent that her life has ended, because for almost all of the time I've known her, I've looked at Lois and thought, this woman is aging so much slower and better than I am. And then suddenly, turns out she's as mortal as the rest of us. But back to Grace. Lois left this life as bravely, as intentionally, and as wisely as any human being I have ever known anything about. It was a fitting end to a really fine life.
What is remembered lives. Amen. I invite you to rise again in body, in spirit, in all the ways that we do. And join in singing number 1064, again in the Teal hymnal, Blue Boat Home.
Below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
I invite you to join in the words in the order of service for Extinguishing the Chalice. Together let us say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Friends, what a gift to be here today. What a gift to have known Lois Smith. She will carry on in each of us the lessons, the energy, her being, her soul. It continues forward in each of us. May we go forth with courage and with kindness and be the blessing that she was also in the world. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. I invite you to sit and listen to the beautiful postlude.